Hello, comrades. I'm Llewyn. My pronouns are they, them, and I make savage crack. Today, I want to share with you some of the delicious potential that is the culturing of nuts and seeds to produce what we'll refer to as non-dairy cheeses. There are near infinite potentials in the combinations of flavors, bases, textures, and colors. So today, we're going to focus simply on cashews, which, in a relatively short time, will culture into a simple spread. We'll also be molding and adding a crust to a Kim cheese, and then having a quick look at what I'm calling a yarg, inspired by the Cornish nettle cheese, that we'll cold smoke for added depth and a touch of theater. Now, regardless of the nut or seed that's used, you'll need to soak them to prep your base to receive its initial culture. We're using 150 grams that were covered in about double the amount of clean water and left overnight. Once you've soaked your cashews, give them a good rinse. Some believe that since we're adding a culture, it can be a good idea to rinse them in boiling water to neutralize any potentially competing microbes. I'll leave that bit up to you. When you place them in your food processor, you'll be giving them a blitz with the culture of your choice. This could be kombucha, water kefir, even koji. Really, whatever culture you have handy. In the Savage Crack House, the one thing we always have plenty of is brine. Brine is also a great way to add flavor that will steer your cheese in a desired direction. This can be something subtle like a simple kraut, or a spicy hit from the juice of kimchi. For this, I have some gorgeous brine from some fermented zug that will add a bit of herbaceous garlic flavor and just a touch of heat. Honestly, this stuff is divine. Ultimately, you'll be wanting to add the brine to texture. This will vary depending on whether you plan to make a spread or a firmer cheese. Your cheese will be slightly pressed or hung to allow some moisture to escape. However, a decent texture at the beginning will make it easier to work with later. So for this, we're going to start with 50 grams of our brine. As with many fermentations, we're going to need some salt. For 150 grams of cashews, we're going to add 5 grams. Keep in mind, there is salt in the brine and other ingredients that we'll be adding. Speaking of other ingredients, I like to add a little bit of miso, around 35 grams. This adds a depth of flavor and a bit more joy for our ferment. We love making misos, and a quick ferment miso like toasted sesame or the gochugaru white bean are perfect for adding complexity. Any miso you have access to is going to do the trick. Now keep in mind, the result should be on the salty side, but this will mellow during fermentation, and the salt will be helping your ferment along the way. The other flavor hero in this mix is going to be our good friend nooch. I put in about 10 grams of nutritional yeast to really boost that umami and drive that cheesy profile forward. You can add a bit less, or even a bit more. This is also where you want to add any other ingredients like herbs or spices, or a colorant like annatto. Keep it in mind, we will have another time to balance flavors after initial couple days of fermentation. Now, as an interesting aside, cashews, like peanuts, almonds, walnuts, and pistachios, are technically seeds. Obviously, we're using the more colloquial use of the term to include any large variety of shelled, oily kernels, the kind that we use to make oils, butters, and just have for snacks. Really, this is just a quick note for those of you who are more botanically inclined, or for those who just fancy a tasty fact. There are 2 popular methods for this next step, and which you choose is really a matter of preference. After you've let this come together for an hour or so, wrap your mixture in muslin or cheesecloth. You can then place it in a bowl wrapped in another towel with a bit of weight on top to help the process along. Alternately, you tie the cloth to a skewer or chopstick, making sure the fabric is tight around your mixture. The goal here is to aid in the mixture drying a little as it ferments, forming a denser paste. Once you've made your little bindle, simply hang it on the corner of a sink or a deep bowl or other container. I find a good sized measuring jug is perfect, and the glass is very easy to keep clean. You're going to want to let it do its thing now for about 48 hours, although I sometimes let it go a bit longer, about 3 days. Once it has had some time to separate from some of its liquid, you can give it a taste and adjust the flavors as necessary. For a simple spread, it could then be served right away, or you could always jar it for later. If you want to make something a bit more solid, then we need to shape this, provide it with a crust, and give it more time to dehydrate and ferment a little further. This is a bit of kimchi I have on the go. The recipe is essentially the same. I just used kimchi brine for the culture, and I added a bit of fermented chili paste, gochujang, along with the miso. You can simply shape this by rolling it into a ball, and then making it into a patty, or really any shape you want. This is where that moisture content really comes into play. If it's too moist to work with, just give it a bit more time or spread it out to dehydrate it. For the crust, I've put some kimchi into a dehydrator to create the powder. We're simply going to coat the outside to add another layer of flavor, a bit of texture, and more stability to the shape of the cheese. In another recipe, this could be different spices, or herbs, or seaweeds to provide the crust. Once this is coated, we can pop this into a dehydrator or low oven to help that crust along just before letting it continue its fermentation. Just remember to keep the temperature low, below or around 30 degrees Celsius. This is really just to help it remove a bit more moisture, and it's not 100% necessary. Next, we're going to want to give this a nice and slow further fermentation in the fridge for a week or two. Make sure it has circulation. A small rack or several sticks over a bowl are perfect for this. Just check on it, give it a flip periodically, and make sure it has plenty of air. Now, there is so much more we could explore, using other cultures, making net-based blues, bries, or camemberts. However, that's going to have to wait for another time. For today, we're going to take this Yarg-style cheese that's been cultured with a traditional sauerkraut brine and rolled in dried nettle, and add a bit more flavor to it by cold smoking it with some dried elderflower. As an added note, if you do this just before service, you'll have something really special to share. The smell of that smoke truly enhances the experience. Well, there we have it, beautiful people. The basics of cultured nuts and seeds to make plant-based cheese. The potential combinations really are only limited by what you have access to and your boundless imagination. So please, keep feeding the spirit and ferment for life. Ciao for now.